Now that Calyx is out on Steam and we can all enjoy its campaign missions, skirmish and challenges, I want to give you a short crash course in its unorthodox RTS gameplay, and some tips on how to best build bases and fight the strange native lifeforms you will find on this alien planet. If you are still on the fence about buying this game, it does still have a demo available, so you can try it for yourself after watching this video and learning how to play it. Just by its nature and map design, you will most often find yourself fighting on more than one front at the same time in Calyx, against one of the most unique enemies ever seen in RTS games. These are the living plant-like creatures which spread over maps like a fast-growing disease with heavy-hitting roots or acid-spitting sprouts. And because of this, the design of the base you build directly influences how you will combat these enemies. Will you turtle up and gain an overwhelming attack force to go and strike at the heart, or should I say the root of your enemies? Or will you rush out tanks and meet your foe midway, pushing them back an inch at a time until you clear the map? Since the campaign is the best way to learn how to play this unique game, I will show you two missions in which I take these two opposite approaches. So the first mission I'm taking you to, for all you turtles out there, is called Tormentor, and as usually in Calyx, you get to choose your starting HQ position. I picked the east side of this very large blue ore resource field and leave just enough room between it and my HQ to be able to construct a refinery, which has to touch one of the HQ's powered spheres, which spread around it in all directions so that it would transfer power to it. The HQ produces 50 units of power on its own, which is just enough to operate the ore transport, which is my second building. And to have ore to transport it, I invest my initial credits into two harvesters, while also reducing ore stockpiles to 0 as I want it shipped into orbit to gain new credits. Since you can't construct additional solar panels for power production without first sending ore into orbit, you can speed up the time until the first delivery. Don't be surprised to see the no power sign above your buildings at this point, because in Calyx, buildings spend different amounts of power in different operating modes. For example, the launch pad for the ore transport spends a lot more power when loading the transport, which is why you have batteries at your HQ. But now with some credits in your bank, you can invest them into your first solar panels to iron out these jumps in power usage. Since you will end up building dozens of these, it is best to place them behind your other buildings and away from the direction from which the enemy will creep up on you. Because in this mission I chose defensive turtling as my starting strategy, I need to expand the power distribution range by building additional pylons. Insert your StarCraft meme of choice here. Anyway, these allow for machine gun turrets to be connected farther away from the HQ and let me create a defensive zone in which I can place new buildings later on. Because machine gun turrets cost only ore, it is a good idea to increase the stockpile limit on ore in the top right of the UI. Especially because if you want to defend a large area and be able to construct more buildings there later on, you need lots of these short-range turrets. Now, these aren't very demanding on the power grid, but their power drain adds up, and with over a dozen turrets, you will need to spend some credits on both new pylons and solar panels. These turrets do have internal power cells, so even if your base runs out of power, they will keep shooting for a while longer under their own power. One tip here is that Calyx plants won't grow over the edges of the map, so if your base has its back to the wall, so to speak, you at least don't have to defend that side with turrets. This detail is a bit immersion breaking, so I would advise the devs to find some way of making this more believable. But that is just my opinion. You can tell me what you think about it in the comments below. Anyway, once you have this perimeter secure and resources keep coming in, you can construct the unit factory and start amassing units for a proper counterattack. This strategy does have two weaknesses. The first is that you lose a lot of time, and if you don't finish the mission in the allotted time, you lose some research points. I will talk about these a bit later in the video. The second downside is that buildings, which can give you additional research points and which are placed in certain parts of the map, keep getting eroded by the enemy, and if they are destroyed before you finish the mission, you again lose out on some research points. Now, as for other types of buildings that can be found on the map, you have the mega generators, harvest boosters, and healers. These are easily distinguished by their tall and narrow construction and the green icons telling you what they can do for you. Besides spending credits on getting them connected to your power grid with multiple pylons, they also require a mountain of energy to keep operational, so don't enable them unless you have a vast number of solar panels built at your base. You can save up some power by turning off turrets which no longer need to protect your base. The next important thing to know is that once you hit the vehicle limit of 20, which includes harvesters, you have to pay for an expensive upgrade at your HQ to raise the vehicle limit. So make sure to save up some credits and ore for that. As usually, for the final push, you can't do it with just 20 vehicles. On that note, I want to give you another tip tied to the combat performance of your vehicles. Because by default the longer range units are set in the back line of unit formations, so when you drag and drop units to move forward, more powerful units with longer range will end up at the back and sometimes unable to shoot at more powerful parts of the enemy. So you have to constantly monitor the progress of your unit control groups and keep repositioning them forward towards the plant's core to keep them shooting. Otherwise, time passes, but you deal little to no damage and make no progress. The Calyx Tormenta plant fires acid at your units like mortar shells, so continuous movement of your units can actually keep them alive for longer. But again, going for that final kill will expose more units to danger and make them pile up close to each other, making them even more vulnerable. It is the dead blow after all, and all the plants will fight you until the bitter end. Now, before we move on to a different strategy for taking on Calyx plants and finishing these missions, let's take a moment to look at the tech tree and use some of these hard-earned research points. While you will notice that these tech upgrades are not very inspired, something I made sure to give as my feedback to the developers, they are still very useful. A harvester which starts the mission with you or more damage across all units with the same damage type will still help you, even if the upgrades themselves are mostly just percentage based. This is a common error developers of RTS games make and create tech trees with not very innovative upgrades. If you have some cool ideas about what could be fun upgrades in Calyx, make sure to share them with the devs who will read your comments on my video here or on their Discord. I will leave a link to it in the description below. Another important thing I have to mention in the gameplay of Calyx are Sandstorms. These are weather events which happen only on certain maps, and during which not only is your power production reduced, but the combat capability of your units is also compromised, with the range of fire being reduced. What this means for your base is a requirement to construct far more batteries, while for your units to pull back during sandstorms or suffer increased casualties. You can decide to gamble against the odds, like I have done in this example, if you are moments away from defeating the main section of a Calyx plant, but do so at your own risk. Now, because in different missions, on different maps and against different forms of Calyx plants, you have to employ different strategies, we are going to switch the turtling strategy with an eventual breakout to a rush, hold and exterminate strategy. This means that instead of spending ore for a lot of turrets and credits on solar panels to support them, we rush the construction of the unit factory and immediately produce as many units as possible to both stop enemy Calyx from expanding and to start pushing it back. This strategy has the extra benefit of allowing you more maneuverability with your offensive units and more chances to save research buildings which might get destroyed if you use the turtling strategy. Another benefit is having more space to build your base and construct more buildings to expand your economy. After that, it is all about bringing as much firepower as you can to a point that is closest to the enemy's roots, destroying anything on your way there and taking out the main Calyx plants. As you advance through the campaign, you will unlock new ways to boost the combat performance of your units, and the Unit Workshop is one such opportunity. It is a very expensive building, but it allows you to buy even more expensive upgrades for your units, which give them more firepower, and so it takes fewer units to deal as much damage, or for the same units to clear more of the map in less time. However you wanna look at it. Do note that to collect enough resources for these, you will need several refineries and half a dozen harvesters at least, with about 3 or more ore transports, which in turn means a load of power and a huge sprawling base. For a game that looks simple, I must admit I was surprised by the amount of depth I was able to find in just a few campaign missions, and glad for the opportunity to try different approaches. Calyx is one of the most innovative RTS games I have played in the last few years, and I am very happy it is now finally out so we can all enjoy it. For more such new and upcoming games, check out the cards on the screen or links in the description. Thank you for watching and happy gaming!